Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Wednesday, July 11th, 2018. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Let's go ahead and get right into some space weather. First, taking a look at solar wind speeds. Right now we're sitting at 376.8 kilometers per second. Momentary lapse of dyslexia here. With a density of 9.9. Just seeing if you guys are on your toes tonight. Looking at the sun, we have no sunspots. This will make now 14 days in a row without a sunspot. We are now at 101 days in 2018 without sunspots. And in 2017, we had 104. So we are easily going to pass that. And I wanted to bring this up really quick because I've noticed that we keep seeing these subtle hints from SPACEWEATHER.com, and again they want to talk about 14 straight days without sunspots. To find a longer stretch of blank suns, you'll have to go all the way back to November of 2009 when the sun was emerging from the deepest solar minimum in a century. However, 2 weeks without sunspots is not a long time. They said back in 2008 the sun was blank for 52 consecutive days. Solar minimum is just beginning, and we have a long way to go. And I can't agree with that statement more, and I'm glad that they stressed that we are in the just beginning of this and that we have a long way to go. Take a look at our KP indices, a little bit more active with a 2 and a 24-hour max of 3. And now we're looking at this SDO on our SDO motion, of course, this coronal hole, I should say. We are expecting effects from this particular coronal hole, solar wind speeds, to reach the planet on July 13th or 14th now. So it has died out just a little bit, but the SDO does represent a chance for some increase in geomagnetic activity on the 14th of July. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Again, 0 sunspots in 14 days. Taking a look at our TSI reading for July 3rd, we have a TSI reading of 1360.6507. Interesting pattern that the TSI is in right now. Before, we were seeing kind of small jumps and small declines. And here lately, we've seen decent jumps and declines here, but a little bit more than what we had been used to back in the winter and the spring months of this year. And let's talk about hurricanes, because we do have a Category 2 right now that's heading towards eastern Canada and Iceland. But this is just the title. What I mean by this is that this hurricane right now, the sustained winds were 105 miles per hour and is moving northeast at 35 kilometers, that's 22 miles an hour, with a minimal pressure of 970. The general motion with additional increase in forward speed anticipated the next 2 to 3 days. In other words, here's your track. I had spoken on this about 3 or 4 days ago, maybe a little longer than that. Might have been last week. I think it was Friday, and I think it was this was an obvious one. Like a novice can predict this one here that just happened. And with the track and with the high pressure system in the Atlantic right now, in the middle of the Atlantic, I think a lot of people predicted this one, including myself, to travel where it's going and then deteriorate as it gets into those colder northern Atlantic waters. And even hurricane strength, right now they're saying from 2 p.m. Thursday before it finally clears the Canadian territory as just a storm, a tropical storm. But it does last all the way till it gets near Iceland before it does finally drop to a tropical depression. But however, this will not be packing any kind of hurricane strength winds as it's traveled over in cooler waters. So we will keep our eyes on this. But again, as many of us have spoken on this particular storm, nothing to really affect the coast now. There were swells that generated by this storm are expected to affect portions of the coast of North Carolina and the mid-Atlantic states during the next few days. These swells could cause life-threatening surf and rip current conditions. Chris is expected to produce a total rain accumulations of 1 to 3 inches over Newfoundland with possible isolated maximum amounts of 6 inches. Flash flooding is possible. I watched on Weather Nation in North Carolina on the coast there, where they were assessing the situation where they were going to have to move this house, as the Atlantic Ocean was basically coming after this house and eating up 5 feet of the shoreline and the dunes there. And, you know, I seen some comments about this particular situation. And one subscriber to the Weather Nation that did the live feed had said, these people should know better when they buy these beachfront properties. And in a way, yeah, they should, maybe. But if they're insured, they don't think about things like that. And obviously, they have to have some kind of insurance to own a home that close to the ocean. Plus, I remember 2 days ago when they first reported on this, as the ocean was kind of tearing up the coastline a little bit. Not major, but enough to cause some damage. They had spoke on how they were in the process of moving it, and today they were actually showing them getting ready to move the house. So obviously you have to have home insurance or homeowners insurance, especially when you have a house that close to the ocean front. No fun, nevertheless, whether you know better or not. Still, you know, very tense times for any homeowner that has beachfront property right now. And taking a look at some sadder news here on the tornado situation. The tornado impacted Waterford City around midnight, a little about 1:45 a.m. on July 10th. It injured 28 people, including a 7-day-old baby who later passed away from his injuries. The boy was critically hurt after a trailer he was in flipped during the storm. 9 others are still in critical condition as of late of July 10th local time. This tornado was an EF2, and they said here the most intense damage corresponded to an EF2 on the enhanced Fujita scale. From that, it was determined that the wind speeds were around 127 miles per hour, folks. This was in a trailer park. And nothing more dangerous than being in any kind of severe weather. And it says here that they were talking about what had happened. Patrol Sergeant Matthew Walsh of the Waterford City Police Department said that hail and steady rain made it difficult for first responders as they worked to evacuate the park. We couldn't see anything, he said. And then on top of that, we have damage from this trailer park. Now, a lot of people were hurt, and you may look at this and think, well, there's not a lot of trailers affected, but there is no chance. If you have a tornado that comes head on to your trailer of any sort, unfortunately, that trailer is not going to survive that, and this is an unfortunate situation here. It doesn't have to take very many. That one right there is tore up completely. Some of them are just moved around. Again, thanks to the watchers for several videos and information about this tornado. If you guys want to read up on it here, I'll have the link in the description. And the monsoon season in full effect. Massive Habub recorded hurricane force gust winds, hail, and recorded a record rain in southwest U.S. Now, I reported on this yesterday, but I wanted to give an update because it gave some stats here. Wind in and around Phoenix gusted over 70 miles per hour on July 9th, downing power lines and bringing traffic to a standstill while heavy rain flooded streets. More than 94,000 customers were left without power as of 12:30 a.m. local time on July 9th. Monday's rain in Phoenix officially ended its streak of 118 days without rain recorded at Sky Harbor Airport, where the city's official records are tallied. Unfortunately, that we talked about this last night too, why it's really not a good idea to record our temperatures, our highs and lows from these airports, as we've seen where these temperature stations are located. But reading on here, this was tied for the longest dry spell without rain, the 6th longest dry streak in Phoenix, tying the one from 1904. Now, these are minimal amounts, folks, so we're not talking about 3 inches of rain. You know, they received 0.48 inches of rain as of early, and that broke the record that was previously set of 0.44. So we're not talking in the masses here, but still, reporting that they are getting some rain, and much needed, but just this insane storm that came through last night with the gusts of winds and the large hail that came with this as well. We had train derailments. Rain has caused train derailment between Twin Peaks and Avra Valley. Some awesome footage here on the watchers. Can't show too much of this. There's the storm clouds building up and a little bit of a time lapse here, just kind of give you an idea how this thing moved in. Thanks again to whoever was smart enough to capture those pictures. Coverage of showers and thunderstorms will increase across the southwest through the end of the week as monsoonal moisture surges north, the National Weather Service meteorologist Campbell noted as of today, adding that heavy rainfall along the terrain could lead up to flash flooding in addition to flood-prone areas. By Thursday, heavy rain will continue in the southwest, but also begin to spread into the southern and central Rockies. There is a slight risk of flash flooding in southwest today, with a slight risk of shifting eastward by Thursday along the Rockies. And we will take a look at this in motion, if this will allow us to. Every once in a while it does. And taking a look at the satellite here, the cloud motion here. We have a east to west flow, and then a west to east flow above it, and then a southwestern flow below that. So definitely moisture coming in from this system. And this is much needed moisture for this area as well, especially in Colorado, southern Colorado. It says while flash flooding is possible and residents should exercise caution, the rain will be beneficial for the drought-stricken region. Yeah, I'd say so. Take a look at our description box for the link for this one. And, okay, so this one here. This one goes both ways. Adjust this a little bit here. I went over this, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, now if we're going to do an article about peer review process, this goes both ways, whether it's about global warming or global cooling. But the point of this article is that the underlying answer for mainstream media for the last 30 years of global warming, even though they have been put in peer-reviewed papers. It says here that out of 100 studies that only an outside author can duplicate the process only a third of the time. That's 33.3333 something something blah blah blah. So out of 100 times of these studies that get done, and again, this can be on both sides of the ball here, not just for global warming, but global cooling. A third of the time, the results are duplicated of the said study. And I thought this was interesting because this is also, as I said, it goes both ways. But it also adds questioning what we've always thought as being obvious textbook answers, the basics. And now it makes you think a little bit more about how maybe the basics need to be looked at again. After talking about all these things, how I was talking about medicine and population science and nutrition studies are not to fare any better when attempts are made to replicate them. When only a third of peer-reviewed studies reach the same results when they are replicated by outside authors, this is a serious problem. Regarding climate change papers, the peer-reviewed papers are likely even less reliable before even considering the incapability political nature of the topic, because many papers address predictions and models for which it is impossible to test the paper's conclusions against objective evidence. For example, when a scientist invents a climate model predicting rapid global warming or seriously negative future climate impacts, and when a paper summarizing the results of his or her model appears in a peer-reviewed journal, there is no way at the time of the publication to compare the climate predictions against real-world observations. This adds an additional level of doubt to the accuracy of global warming predictions published in peer-reviewed papers in science journals. It's a lot to take in. But The lesson to be learned is the liberal media engage in laziness or deliberate misrepresentation when they cherry pick data from certain peer-reviewed studies and claim that anybody who questions it is attacking science, attacking scientists, or being a denialist. Sound science requires critically testing theories and predictions, including those published in peer-reviewed science journals, against objective evidence. And I think the person that wrote this article understood that as well, being said for the global cooling. We are called deniers, science deniers, climate deniers. We're the deniers because we disagree with whatever global warming peer-reviewed papers come out. And it looks like that around 66% also disagree with the results of that paper. So when the next time you have somebody tell you that 90% of the scientists out there say this because of a peer-reviewed paper, go ahead and mention to that person, well, did you know that only a third of the time can you replicate the results of the original author of that said peer-reviewed paper? That means 66% of the time you cannot replicate what the findings were in the actual paper study done. Like I said, this goes both ways. But what I think the narrative should be here is that people who are not accepting what we are finding on this side of the community, the people that we follow, the Piers Corbins, Heinrich Svensmark, John Casey, Valentina Zarkova, Per Strandberg, you know, what they're going off of is we need to take a look at this right here, guys. We need to take a look at our oceans, our ENSO cycles. We need to take a look at everything, not just solar activity. And as we've done this channel over the last several months, 2 years going on, you know, we've learned so much that there's so much to the grand solar minimum. There's so much to these cycles. There's so much to our climate. And it's intensely fragile, either way, warming or cooling. So the next time somebody calls you a denialist or a climate denier or a science denier, go ahead and remind them, say, hey, did you know that in these peer-reviewed studies that only a third of the results were replicated by the original outside authors? And if they say, where did you hear that from? Just tell them to go to What's Up With That, WATTS. Make sure you never put the H. You'll never find this website. Or just give them the link to this video, because the link of this article will be there for anyone who wants to question the numbers. And like I said, it could go both ways. You can say the same about cooling and CO2 and how we've found that it's a greening effect. And yeah, that means only a third of the results were replicated. And then there were 66% that likely didn't meet those numbers. So what do? You continue to test the theories. You continue to do the studies. You continue to update the research. Nobody said this was going to be an overnight figure out. And just reporting on this, you have to have great patience. Because this is an event that takes time. It's not going to be an abrupt... Now, I'm not saying that an abrupt change couldn't happen. Sure, an EMP or a CME, earth-facing, weaker magnetic field, all kinds of things would have to be in factor. Power grid going down, what will you do if your power grid's down for 7 months, 14 months, 21 months? What would you do? How would the government respond? Would it be just an isolated area? Would it be a large area? But we have to continue to test new research and give that information a look as well, especially when there's a 66% chance that you won't replicate the results in that study. So peer-reviewed only goes so far, and don't think that there's no money being lobbied around for these some of these scientists who write these papers on warming. Take a look here. I found this to be a little interesting. The Green Climate Fund, meant to channel billions of dollars to poor nations, said it had a very difficult and disappointing meeting ending on Wednesday in a new setback after U.S. President Donald Trump pulled out of U.S. support last year. So Australian climate finance expert Howard Bamsey announced that he was stepping down as the executive director of the fund, the Green Climate Fund, after a 4-day meeting in Songdo, South Korea. The GFC, whose South Korean headquarters opened in 2013 with backing from almost 200 nations, aims to help poor nations cut greenhouse emissions and adapt their economies to heat waves, storms, and rising seas. Bullshit! But it has been bogged down by disputes between rich and poor nations and how and where to invest. It's quoted here from Mr. Howard Bamsey. This has been a very difficult and disappointing board meeting for all of us, but most importantly for those people who are most vulnerable to climate change impacts and who depend on the activities of the fund. And that was actually a statement from the GCF chair, Lennart Baj, said in the statement. Now, the meeting had challenging and difficult decisions between the board members, and that the GCF spokesman had declined to further comment. The meeting failed to add up to its portfolio of 76 projects with $3.7 billion worth of funds that were needed for this, which range from promoting rooftop solar energy in India to helping Colombia safeguard wetlands. And then there's another story that talks about how it's for personal reasons and not political. But from what I understand, and what this author here is also including, is that money is running low with just $2.8 billion left to allocate. But Finland's board member Satu Santala tweeted that was not the reason talks failed. Well, of course they're going to deny it. But yeah, out of that 7.2, 2.8 left to allocate, it sounds like they're having a hard time figuring out where to invest this money. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of an investigation that gets opened up, because usually when the head of the committee here, this guy, he was the executive director of the Green Climate Fund for Australia, and he just stepped down effective immediately. Now, I understand that there was probably a lot of there had to have been some arguing for someone to just all of a sudden say, all right, that's it, I'm out, I'm done. Or was he running because of there's some miscalculations on money, where it's went and how it's been spent, and who hasn't gotten their share yet, and who is paid and who hasn't, and now it's getting hot under the collar, and that very well could happen. I don't know who this guy is, so I don't want to make an accusation, but it's one or the other, I think, and it's concerning to me as a citizen of the world that these leaders that are in control of this Green Climate Fund, this jackpot, and they're having trouble allocating money. And it could be a possibility that there's countries that are going to miss out on this. Who knows? Still troubling sign, and another good indication that we made the right decision for pulling out of this nightmare of a situation. We already had lost billions of dollars to this treaty already. Okay, now we're just saving ourselves from spending billions more and just basically giving these people a blank check for climate change. Oh, by the way, I wanted to show this real quick. Here's a chart. Talks about Arctic sea ice volume. The straight line is the projection from the IPCC hustlers. There was Alfred Gore on there too as well, but you know, I don't even want to give him the platform, put his name anywhere on this channel anymore, really. So there's the line that these brilliant people, as like Gore, who have projected that sea ice would plummet by year 2018. And then that line that you see above the line that's plummeting is actually the reality, with a little bit of declination of ice from the early 2000 to around the next minimum, and then slightly increased numbers. But now we're seeing a rise once again in Arctic sea ice volume. So I just want to show everybody in mainstream, especially if anybody who's arguing with you about whether we're warming or cooling or whether ice is melting or not, this chart doesn't get any more clear than this. All right, they were off big time, and lots of laws and lots of regulations were wrote around claims by these people at the IPCC, Al Gore, and others. So we've increased the spending because we were told that we're the ones in charge of warming this planet at a fast rate, but yet the sea ice is not really changing. If anything, it's going to be increasing. And more good news. This will help with misspent taxpayer money. The White House is reviewing EPA proposal to repeal Obama's CO2 regulations. We talked about this with Pruitt. Now this is gaining some more steam because Andrew Wheeler is a little bit more popular with Republican Congress. So this is going to be a full steam ahead here. This CPP basically was looking to cut carbon levels down to 32% below 2005 levels by 2030. And what this would have done is it would have shut down the coal industry completely. And then there's people out there that say, well, you don't care about the environment if you want to see coal being burnt. But no, I just say that I've seen the other studies that show us that coal, CO2, is not a pollutant, and that our environment benefits from CO2. And that's what a lot of people are seeing right now. And that's why these EPA, look, it's not about money right now. It will, and it'll affect your pockets down the road. Hopefully this will lower prices again. Without these restrictions. And then there's people, oh, you're going to hear about how the air is dirtier now. I don't want to say anything, guys, but look what happened to Flint. And this happened under a good chunk of Obama's time with his EPA regulations. How come that didn't help Flint? How come there was no help for Flint? Why are they still dealing with brown water? Shouldn't our best engineers in the country be on location at all times? This shouldn't happen. Not in the United States. I just, I'm done with the double talk. And we've already shown you guys studies that show how much temperature drop would result if the countries were following the climate treaty and doing exactly what they were told, and it drops the temperature a whole 0.0015 degrees Celsius, and it costs you billions of dollars. Well, not you personally, but the world. It's taxpayers, billions of dollars for a change in temperature that would never be noticeable by any man. It would take 20 years for it to be noticeable. I think here soon that the world and a lot of other people are going to find out that we don't have to worry about lowering CO2 to help cool the planet. They're going to see it happen right before their eyes. And then they'll just blame it, well, it's solar minimum. We'll be fine because there will be a little tiny burst of activity, but nothing compared to what the normal summers that we've had before. We'll see hot spells, I'm sure, but it won't be the same. And by the time we get around to 2030, then what? 2028, 2029, 2030, what are they going to say then when things start declining rapidly once again? I'm glad to see these policies go away. I think the American people have been robbed enough of energy costs, and I'm just glad to see that we're going to be doing things that's going to be smart, not only for our country but for others to hopefully follow suit. Go ahead and leave the link in this description. And another interesting little brief paragraph I wanted to share real fast. You wouldn't think the sea level is so complex. Since precise measurements began, mean atmospheric CO2 level has risen for 58 consecutive years with no detectable acceleration of sea level rise. Here we go, more proof. Professor Fred Singer, the sea is rising, but not because of climate change. Optum May 16th is right. CO2 emissions have no detectable effect on sea level rise. Professor Andrea Dutton and Michael E. Mann, May 22nd, letter claim. Without measurable evidence that human-caused climate change raises sea levels. Sea level is rising in some places and falling in others. Globally, sea levels are very slowly rising, but human-caused climate change cannot be the cause because the rate of rise is no greater now than when the first Model A rolled off the Ford assembly line. In other words, there's been no change of acceleration. Either way. Further speaking on, Professor Dutton and Mann also suppose the Antarctic ice sheet simply must lose ice in warming climate because of basic physics. That's also nonsense. Most of Antarctica averages far below freezing, so a few degrees of warming won't melt it. Melting decreases ice sheet mass balance, while snowfall adds to it, offsetting sea level rise. Multiple studies confirm that accumulating snow on ice sheets increases as the climate warms, the result of a downwind of ocean effect snowfall. Compelling evidence shows global warming from fossil fuel use is modest and benign, and higher CO2 levels measurably benefit agriculture and natural ecosystems, outweighing hypothetical harms. Imagine that. And I just mentioned that as well. How the CO2 does benefit our planet. It's not a poison, as some have put it. This planet is huge. It would take a lot of CO2, and we've had CO2 levels higher than this, and what was the blame? It was before humans. What's your reason for all that CO2 hundreds of thousands of years before we were even around? You can't. It's natural. It happens. And all we can do, like channels like us, is just report on what we can read and relay to the people and try to break it down as layman's term as possible. That this is a slow-moving climate event. I'm not a prediction artist here. I'm not going to try to sit here and claim. I've made a few small predictions about certain things, but nothing about where to live and when the food shortages are going to start and everything. You know, I think once you start putting dates out there, you're setting yourself up. Right now, what this topic needs is integrity. And as long as we just keep reporting the facts and the truth, like in these articles, we're not going to be doing anything wrong. Period. Because just in the small 2 years that I've been doing this, the stuff that I've been preaching about is happening right in front of my eyes without the articles. I can see that now. I couldn't see that then 2 years ago. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what to watch. Let's take a look at our national radar. Louisiana has got the most action right now. Believe it or not, there's no severe watches or anything like that out right now. But we do have shower activity in Kentucky, Tennessee, into Virginia, pushing into North Carolina, moving west to east. And then just about every way, shape, or form in the southwest, where you're seeing sporadic showers in the Four Corners region. And that area needs it more than anything. Take a look at Southern California, getting a little action as well. Northwest and Northeast, and the Midwest really is all quiet right now, which we've been enjoying some awesome weather. Temperatures in the upper 70s with no humidity. Actually feels good at night to sleep with the windows open again. Here is our North Atlantic SST anomaly. We dropped a little bit and then kind of went just a little bit back, but we're hovering at the negative 0.758 value. Again, still trending well below the baseline for this time of year, and we will continue to watch these numbers each day of this month as we have watched it pretty much trend downward since May 3rd, and a steady decline as well. So very cold waters, record cold waters coming out of North Atlantic. Here's a map of what we see with the anomalies. I see a lot more blue and white than I do orange and reds, that's for sure, in the Atlantic. It's trying to heat up, trying to get some warmth here, but some areas are just not getting as warm as, let's just say, some of these storms would like it to be. And that's what's keeping our storms quiet right now. And looking at windy, I'm just going to play this in motion. Let me back this up. I was looking at this earlier. Sorry, guys. Okay, come on. Keep going. Alright, so here we are tonight, putting this in motion as we take a look at Chris sitting out there in the Atlantic, nowhere near the United States, just a little wave action. We see the spotty, isolated storms. And other than that, you know, the tropics are kind of quiet. Normal moisture for them right now, if not below normal. But off and on chances for storms in the southwest and even parts of western Texas. And then the northern plains will once again begin to fire up with storm activity, channeling all the way down to the southwest. This is all by just this weekend. So very active in the upper northern plains and southwestern part of the United States, where some storms try to push into the Midwest, but really the Tennessee, Kentucky valleys, you're going to stay pretty much rain-free all the way through the weekend. And then by the end of the weekend, we'll start to see the chances for showers and thunderstorms build up a little bit more in the southwest, the Midwest, and of course Tennessee and Kentucky valleys as we move into early next week. Monday, showers will be widespread and also reaching into the northeast by early Tuesday into Tuesday afternoon, before a system behind that comes across the northern Midwest. And once again, just a typical pattern here of chances of showers every other day in the Four Corners region. But the biggest news, as we watch the windy forecast take us out to the 20th of July, is no developments, no tropical developments whatsoever. No invest, not even in the Pacific right now. Nothing major to talk about. Very quiet. So curious to see our sunspot regions. If we do develop any, there's a possibility we could see one within the coming weeks, but there's a good chance that we will also stay away from any kind of sunspot activity. We'll take a look at the GFS. It goes out just a little bit further here. It goes to the 26th. So we'll start it at the beginning here. And really just this repetitive pattern of rain in the southwest and across the northern plains and in the Midwest. The GFS is also showing that. We've got that high pressure system just parked right there in the middle of the Atlantic, and that's keeping really everything moving along pretty smoothly. Is throwing moisture towards Florida, but again, even the GFS is not showing any kind of activity whatsoever in the tropics. So Chris is going to move out of here. There is a little slight concern that Newfoundland might get hit with some outer rain bands anywhere in the tune of 1 to 3 inches from Chris, and possibly some localized areas of 6 inches. But other than that, not going to be too many dangers, not too much to be aware of as far as damage or anything like that. Just heed your local warnings and pay attention. Who knows, things change on a daily basis. So with that being said, Mari, how's everybody doing tonight?
Everyone's wonderful. I just want to thank Rain. I don't know if you've met him in the chat. Rain Silver Splash. He donated via Super Chat. I just want to give him a thank you. We have a lot of wonderful people in the chat sharing ideas and information. Some people like this time slot. I've been telling people we are mixing up the time slots. We have a lot going on in our personal lives now, but we do try to do a day show and a night show to sort of accommodate different time zones.
Yeah, we do appreciate it. And everybody, just know on Saturday at 6:30, our show with Henrik, we're going to take on some questions. So think of some questions that, you know, maybe we can bounce off of each other for Saturday night, as I think we're going to get a little more in depth about prepping solutions and what to do when things do get a little gnarly out there, and when we have to start relying on survival skills because possibly grid failures for a few months or a few years, who knows. So only time will tell, and all we can do is just educate ourselves and be ready, try to spread the word the best that we can, and hope that everyone gets the message. And that's going to do it for us tonight, guys. Thank you for tuning in once again. Thank you for all the donations in the super chat. Again, thanks to our mods. And we will talk soon, guys. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.